Welcome to the first This Professional Life podcast episode. To kick off the new podcast and the new year, we wanted to talk about goal setting and how we can better prepare ourselves to hit our goals for the year. Except we got a little bit of a twist, and this is what we think you will find interesting and perhaps more effective than the traditional way of goal setting. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast on This Professional Life, where we talk about all things related to building and growing your professional career in today's world. My name is Chris, and when I'm not working on This Professional Life, I'm busy managing business development and marketing initiatives at Dentons, a global law firm.
And I'm Nina, and when I'm not at The Professional Life, I'm busy managing clients at Edelman, a global communications firm. And so before we dive into this topic, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button. And if you're enjoying this on a podcast, make sure that you subscribe so that you're up to date with all of our new episodes.
All right, so goal setting. I'm sure it's on everyone's mind when the new year begins. We think about what we want for our personal selves, things like our health. We want to start thinking about what we want to accomplish for the year, such as our finances, our careers. But we also want to maybe move up in the corporate ladder this year. Or maybe we'll want to get our side hustle going that we talked about for all of 2020. So no matter what it is that time of year to think about goal setting and planning. But I also think it's important to have clarity in what you want before you attempt at doing goal setting or planning your goals. So I think step number one is to have that clarity and to write down what you want for both your professional life and your professional career. And I think having that clarity will actually help enable you to begin setting out those details that you need for goal setting. But before you do that, I want you to keep that super high level. Don't provide any of those details yet, because we got a bit of a twist for you. And so I'm going to hand it off to Nina and maybe talk about how people can look at it differently from a goal setting standpoint.
Thanks, Chris. And definitely you hit the nail on the head with that one. Goal setting has been very different in 2020, and I think 2021 is going to be no exception to that. So what I actually learned was last week we had Kim Catran join us at Edelman, and this was a virtual event, of course. And being the millennial that I am, instead of asking you a question during her interview, I creeped her website instead. So what I came across was at the bottom, it just says set habits, not goals. And I think that may have been something that I would have heard before, but just hearing it in the context of the pandemic, it resonated with me quite differently. And then I started thinking about this and I was like, wait, first of all, what's the difference between a habit and a goal? Are they not the same thing? And I came across finding that a habit is actually a behavior where a goal is an outcome of some sort. So I realized that maybe I've been looking at my goals completely wrong. And to give some context, and I know that this is launching in February, so I actually do my goal setting or habit setting, I should call it now, in November, so on my birthday. To me, it's just that is kind of when my life started, so I can measure my years that way instead of starting in January. And then it also gives me a couple of months head start on any of the January New Year resolutioners. And so each year when I would write down my goals, I would achieve some and then some I wouldn't. And they would just live in my notebook forever. And I didn't really go back to them. So now that I'm applying this habit method, what I'm doing is that I'm changing my behavior about things. And with COVID, like we mentioned earlier, your world can literally come to a stop. So for myself, last year, my goal was to run a 10K. And when COVID happened, gyms closed, and I was working from home and there was no boundaries, I wasn't able to train and I wasn't able to accomplish that. But now what I've done this year is I've changed that and just being like, you know what, my habit is to be physically active. And so what I'm doing now is that changing that behavior. Instead of thinking of, okay, at the end of this, I need to have this. It's more of like, okay, let me just change the way that I'm living my life.
So I'm going to jump in a little bit because to your point, I think that's what's going to drive the long-term success of your goal planning. And I feel I'm with you because I've done that before where you set the goals and it's so easy to not hit the success or the mark on your goal. Whereas if you develop the habit you're building that inner almost resiliency, your inner like the tools you need to actually get there. Whereas I do agree with you. The goal setting just seems like it's just something we put on paper. Whereas if you do work on the habits, that's where you're really building your body towards, achieving those goals. So it's more about the habits, and I really like that angle.
On one hand, I do understand like how with the SMART goals, you want to be specific. So you do want to have these blinders and you want to be focused. But at the same time, I think once I started opening that up, and instead of it being like, yeah, like run 10 kilometers, it's just be active, I'm able to achieve it a little bit better. Because I think prior to that, every day where I didn't train, I was upset with myself. But now if I'm like, you know what, I didn't train, but I did an at-home workout, that's still a habit that I'm forming. So I think we're being a little bit more forgiving with ourselves as well, and just setting ourselves up for success. Because I've also definitely been there when I'm not achieving my goal or I haven't hit those milestones, I'll give up because you're like, you know what, it's too far in and I'm not going to achieve it. So let's just forget about it. And I think that's common with many people. And I think that's kind of why we see goal setting kind of like dwindle off as the year goes on.
Now, I know you've got some analogies that you're going to maybe share with us, but one thing that comes to mind right away is like, for martial artists, let's say your goal is to break the board. You just don't keep hitting the board, hoping that one day you're going to hit the board. You're going to train, the strategy, the tactic, what angle you come down. Like you're going to work on that. You're going to work on the strength of your foot, your leg, and all that habit and building up will lead to eventually breaking the board. But if all you're doing is hitting a board every weekend and it doesn't break, to your point, you'll just end up giving up. So that's my one analogy that I have.
Yeah, Chris. And speaking of that, so in the past couple of months since I've turned the big 29, so it's the last of my 20s, and
I feel so
obviously grateful. I'm grateful, but at the same time, like I'm noticing that there's definitely changes. And I think prior to this, like, when you're in high school, you kind of like just know the natural next step. You finish university. I mean, this is for myself, got a job. And then even within my job, it's like you kind of know where the next step is. But what I'm finding is that our world since COVID, it's just there's so many opportunities. And since COVID hit, I know that there's many entrepreneurs that have started their side hustle. And I know that we chatted with a couple of them. So really, like, I think it was a life lesson that anything can happen. But that also was really tough for me because I didn't know now what I wanted next. So since, it's been a couple of weeks, but what I've been doing is just playing around with meditation, law of attraction. And I've been playing some YouTube videos, and honestly, I've had the best sleeps. And
Nice.
I know my alarm will go off and I'll hit snooze for about an hour and a half. But the point is, I'm still very rested when I wake up. And I think that has been great. But then I started thinking about like, what is it that I actually want in life? And I know you were talking about journaling, and that was something I started incorporating in my life. And I call it garbage writing. So all you're just doing is you're just writing whatever comes to your mind. And there was a couple of days where I just felt like so hopeless, just wasn't excited about anything. And I started writing, and then I was like, oh, it's because of this one task that I'm doing at work, or it's because of this one thing. But had I not, I think, physically let it out, I would have not known what to do. And then also out of that, like once I kind of started doing that more, I thought about it like, is it my work? Is it more money? Is it to be healthier? And I think that those themes started coming up. And what I found was that for myself, what my habit is to be able to think outside of the box. And I joke with my husband about this, but it's like I want to physically stretch my brain and just expand on what I know and like how I'm going to act. And I actually have a note on my computer that just says, what are you doing? Who are you doing it for? How can you do it differently? And think further. And I think through that, I ask myself literally those questions, regardless of what I'm doing. So whether that's work or cooking, I just want to think further. So in addition to trying new things, I think with COVID, we've all picked up a hobby or two. And for some people, that's a home project. Some people, that's a new workout, new Netflix genre. And whatever it is, I know that we've all at least tried something new. And so I picked up baking, and I just want to say that I was a terrible baker, like absolutely terrible. Nothing out of even of a Betty Crocker box was good enough.
Not
And
the
it was pretty
instant
embarrassing.
mix. The instant
Oh,
mix did work.
I tried it all. I tried it all. And somehow, I don't know if I did like one too many eggs or not enough water, whatever it was, it just was not good enough. So I wanted to go back to baking and just see if I could improve that. And it also didn't help that everybody was baking on Instagram. So I was like, okay, I need to make this sourdough bread or something. So then going back to my habit of thinking outside the box, I literally had to think outside the box. And I was just finding different recipes with like different ingredients, or like the 3-ingredient no bake healthy snacks. And I still wasn't good at it. So what I did was that I started applying those 4 questions that I asked myself. So it's like, who am I doing it for? I'm doing it for myself. What am I doing it for? It's a treat. So applying that, like just asking myself those questions made me realize like I am actually just looking for a sweet snack and I'm going to have it after dinner. And so once that happened, I was able to like curate a nicer recipe for myself, and I now make the best scones. So it's things like that. Like I think had my goal been to like bake more, I may have not necessarily gotten there. But I think by thinking outside the box, I was able to ask my questions when I was baking, and then I was able to do something that I'm actually happy and proud of. So I think for me, going back to that, it's more of that habit and that like behavior. I know that there's a lot of great books on this too. So there's The Compound Effect, and that just goes to, like how you can like build on each idea more and more. And then also The Power of Habit. So just understanding like what is the trigger, what is the reward. And then once you get into that cycle, it's a lot easier to create those habits and create them so that they're sustainable, and that it's not at, December 31st, if you didn't achieve that goal, it's out. Or like building off that goal. So it's like maybe you did 10K the year prior and now you're doing 15, but you're constantly growing with that.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is when you start building those habits, right? Maybe you don't hit that, to your point, maybe you don't hit that 10K run, but how much healthier are you? How much stronger are you because you've been building up, whether it's doing more push-ups, whether it's like, even just walking more, getting more steps in a day, like you're building up those good habits. And I think eventually it'll lead up to that. So, part of me also thinks sometimes we as ourselves are very hard on ourselves with these goals, right? We set these really high aspirations, which is great, but we don't outline the work that we do in between to get there. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle with goal setting, right? And I see it in my professional job every day. With the lawyers that I help, is sometimes we all know what that goal is, but we don't develop the habits to get there. So I think it's really good that you bring this up, that the habits and thinking outside the box is one way of looking at how you can better approach, whatever it is you're trying to set for yourself.
And I think it's also nice with the habits that it is so transferable. Like I'm asking myself these 4 questions at work. I'm asking it when I'm baking. Like I think that's what makes it so great, because a lot of times our goals are like personal, professional, and they don't necessarily overlap. And I think then you feel overwhelmed because you're like, how am I supposed to juggle all these things? But I think if you're able to find those places where they do overlap, or just like something that transcends across all of them, you're kind of like setting yourself up for more success.
So thanks everyone for taking the time to listen to today's topic. Make sure you drop your comments below about this topic and let us know what you're preparing for 2021 and what goals and what habits now you're going to be working on to try to hit those targets for the end of this year. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the follow, or the like button. Every little bit helps our channel. And shoot us a message on other topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes. I'm Chris.
And I'm Nina. We'll catch you next time on This Professional Life.